a bad idea for me to come out on a podcast and disagree with Paul Graham because he's amazing.
What's going on, guys? My name is Wes Raza, and welcome back to another episode of Crushing It, a podcast dedicated to inspiring young individuals to pursue their passion by showcasing other individuals who are doing exactly that. Again, I'm your host, Wes Raza, but before we jump into today's guest, I want to give a huge shout out to this season's sponsor, the Herb Keller Center for Entrepreneurship here on campus. They are the starting point and launchpad for everything related to startups. So if you're seeking founder resources, you're looking for funding, or you just want to pitch practice with mentors and investors, they are the place to go. So make sure you check them out in the link in the description below. And if you can't find a way to connect with them, leave a comment and we'll do that for you. I also want to thank our other sponsors, the Blackstone Launchpad, a cross-curricular hub for entrepreneurship here on campus, and ATI, a deep tech incubator that services early stage companies here at UT Austin. Now on to today's guest. Today's guest is an entrepreneurial titan on campus. He's a community builder, entrepreneurial leader, and SVBTrekker who's passionate about startups, products, and technology. Over the past few years, he has worked on Genesis, where he helped build structures to scale from 10 people to 25 plus people after they raised $1.8 million. He's also worked on LEA, where he started Texcon, facilitated operations for over 50 people, and helped manage a budget of over $10,000. As his journey on the 40 acres comes to a close, a new one starts for him at Uber this fall. Please join me in welcoming Daniel Miyares. Did I pronounce that right?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course, man. So before we get into things, I just want to know, how did you get into the startup space? Because you seem to be the entrepreneurial titan in a way on this campus. So how did all of this begin?
Nah, man. Entrepreneurial titan on this campus, that's an overstatement for one. I need to correct that. Second thing, though, I think I've been really lucky because I've met the right people. I think the first interaction I might have had on campus at one of those big org fairs was with a guy named Cage Johnson, and I wouldn't be here doing this podcast without him. But Cage basically said, hey, man, are you interested in startups at one of those org tables for the Long Run Entrepreneurship Agency? Mm-hmm. And I really became really interested and really involved with that organization because they gave me the opportunity to be involved with startups without necessarily having a good idea or anything worth pursuing on my own. Mm-hmm. So I actually worked on Freshman Founders. I came up with an idea. I tried to build it out. I failed. I learned a lot from that failure, kind of that classic story. And then I led Freshman Founders in my sophomore year. That really opened me up to seeing how important it is to be a community builder and how much I like doing that. Mm-hmm. And in my third year, I led the Long Run Entrepreneurship Agency, and that really made it so that I could be, in your eyes, an entrepreneurial titan. In my eyes, someone who could send an email and connect people who are much smarter than me mm-hmm. to work on really, really cool things. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm working today on Genesis, because what I'm doing is really trying to empower those people who I think are working on really awesome stuff, using the talents and the skills that I've built up over the last 4 years.
Okay, and so there are a few things there that I do want to cover.
Definitely.
One thing is going to be about the emails and being a super connector, because
sure.
over time, I think that's one of the most important aspects of entrepreneurship is that building those relationships. But let's backtrack before that. When you were at the org table, what clicked for you with the LEA or with the Longhorn Entrepreneur?
I mean, I think Cage is a really engaging personality, so that really helped me to get engaged with LEA really early on. I think what clicked for me, and this was before I went to college, is I kind of realized that in high school, I was really interested in tech and really interested in entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I have a really close friend in high school to thank for that. But when I came into college, I was starting to realize that the best time to get involved in entrepreneurship was not after you had worked at a company for 10 years. In fact, the best time was probably when you were in college, because I tell this to people all the time. I tell this to people in emails. I tell this to people at coffee chats. I say that when you're in college, if you go out and you try a startup and you fail at any level of failure, if you fail to get one customer, which is what I did, if you fail to get venture funding, if you fail after getting venture funding and you fall flat on your face, then you wake up the next day and you're at one of the best universities in the world. Mm-hmm. You have your food provided for, or you have some kind of food plan. You have a support network all around here in the form of 40,000 Longhorns and at least a dozen close friends for most people. That's really wonderfully helpful and a pleasure and a privilege that most entrepreneurs do not have access to. Mm-hmm. So I realized for me, the time to get involved with entrepreneurship was now and not after I felt like I knew what I was doing, whether or not people ever know what they're doing.
Okay, and so you pointed out that the best time is now, right?
Yeah.
Well, do you know who Paul Graham is from Y Combinator? So
yeah.
I was watching some of his videos from Startup School,
mm-hmm.
and one of the things he actually said was the complete opposite. He was talking about how, that it's probably the worst time to start
mm-hmm.
a company, because most students are, I don't know, either, don't quote me on here, but it was more of you either don't have fully focused, you can't be fully focused on your startup, because most startups fail if they're not full time.
Sure.
And also you gain a lot more experience and find more co-founders once you go out into the workforce, right? Yeah. So how can you like counteract that?
Yeah.
In terms of like college is still the same, is the best place.
Probably a bad idea for me to come out on a podcast and disagree with Paul Graham, because he's amazing. But I mean, I can speak to like why I have that opinion and why he has his. Yeah. They're very, I mean, they're for startups at different stages. So I think if you're trying to found the next Facebook, the next Salesforce, the next whatever company it is, then likely you will need at a very early point to drop out and figure out exactly like how to run the company given the however many hours there are in a week, because it is all consuming to create a startup of that size. I think to learn entrepreneurial skills, and this is again an opinion that's different than a lot of people at the university, I don't think you can really do that in a class. You can't learn all of the essential entrepreneurial skills or about entrepreneurship and startups in class. You have to go out and you have to do something, whether that's community building, whether that's running an event within an organization, whether that's like running a podcast, or whether that's trying to create a startup or a small business. And I think in college, while it's not well set up, as Paul Graham is alluding to, while it's not well set up to create a company that would get into YC, it's really well set up to create a company and kind of learn the essential skills of like how to sell, how to build, how to create a team, how to organize a team. It's really well set up for that kind of thing. And I think, again, like we'll talk about it more later in the podcast, I'm sure, but why Genesis is there is to get people out of the dorm room and into the real world with grants and with mentorship. And that's why so many of these programs exist. So it's a good time to learn those essential skills. It's definitely not a good time to like found the next Facebook. That's why the most successful ones you see are dropouts, or they're, you know, people coming from another company.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And you just mentioned right now that you probably get the most experience when you're actually building it out. And I think that's probably one of the most formidable things about entrepreneurship, especially business in general, because I feel like, and this is my personal opinion, I'm not trying to like degrade anyone that's like doing this, but I like personally chose computer science over business for the sole reason that computer science is a unique skill set in a way where if you opened up a notepad, right, and you said, I want to build this app, I want to do something like that, you wouldn't even know the first line of code, because you would have to like actually go and learn it. It's like a skill set that you can't just like, you know, garner out of nowhere or like look up or stuff. Like you can take courses, but it's not something you can fully comprehend outside of the classroom. And
that's why I'm most self-conscious about being a business major, to be honest. It's like, it's wild for me, because I talk with my roommates, I talk with my best friends in business all the time about what kind of skills we've actually learned, and it's really hard to quantify or to put into words what a business major knows at the end of 4 years of education. While if you're a computer scientist, a mechanical engineer, a psychologist, there are like definitely things that you have learned. For business, it's like I've learned definitions of things that will eventually help me manage teams in a workplace. That's so wonderfully general compared to the specific skill set you get from so many other schools. So
exactly, and that's why I think that the reason why I did that is because like you can just like go and build a company and like learn most of those things, because if you, like you said, if you throw yourself in the deep end while you're in college, you'll eventually over time like learn those things, because you'll have to if you're actually passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah, you have to learn to be scrappy, basically. No class will ever teach you to be scrappy. It'll teach you how to cram, which is some small form of that, but it won't teach you how to like how to manage communications, how to do all these things on deadline, how to ruthlessly prioritize what you're doing, because any startup has one of my mentors said this. It's something like the highest work to people ratio you're going to find that at startup, and then tech companies, and then any other company, basically.
You juggle more roles too, right?
Juggle more roles, juggle more kinds of tasks, diversity of tasks, and just volume of things that you need to do at any given time.
Yeah, exactly. And so now let's like transition a little bit into your work with LEA and Genesis.
Sure.
So how did you actually, like you said that you started leading the Freshman Founders Program, then you became the director, right? So how did all of that like work out? What are like some of the things that you learned?
Yeah, so I think it was really interesting, the difference between the roles that I've had. So when I was running Freshman Founders, I was basically working in a team of 2 to 3 people at any given time. And we were working to just mentor freshmen that were in my position a year before that, and connect them with mentors and get them started and help them work on the companies that they were already working on. So that was a very like getting into the nitty gritty and helping people kind of role, which I really enjoyed a lot. I think that's something that I've always been drawn to, is just like having a large impact on a small number of people instead of they're both attractive, but like it's really fun to do a large impact on a small number of people instead of a small impact on a large number of people. So I was doing that with freshman founders. A lot of it was just, hey, let's have a meeting, let's talk about our problems, let's try to figure this out, let's have a workshop, let's connect you to mentors. I think that is really easy to talk about, really easy to quantify exactly what I did, because that means I need to send emails, I need to connect people, I need to track all these things, I need to make sure that everyone's getting the benefits that they want to, I need to have one-on-ones. So that was not necessarily easy, but it was really easy to quantify what was high priority for me, right? High priority wasn't, oh, let's make a really cool brand for freshman founders, because I already had the freshman founders. I just needed to help them do what they were already doing. For when I was in LEA, the questions became so much more strategic, because we have so many resources within the Longhorn Entrepreneurship Agency at our disposal. We have, first and foremost, we have so many great people in LEA. As you know, we have something like 30 to 50 people every single year. So in my year leading freshman founders, I was in LEA, and I got to experience that and see all the wonderful things that people were working on. But then when I had the opportunity to lead LEA, the question really became like, how do I get everyone to swim in the same direction, and what direction is that going to be for the university? So defining that became kind of the question that I was looking at every single day of like, what are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? And if we're doing these things, how do we make sure we do them as effectively as possible? So a lot of my role was not necessarily like with the freshmen, just working individually with everyone to help them succeed. That was what I did with LEA, but I also had to ask bigger questions of like, okay, why are we doing it? What do we want to focus on? If someone comes to me and says, hey, what are you working on at LEA? What is it that we're most excited about? Or if someone in LEA says, what can I help you with? I better have a darn good answer to say like this high impact, high priority and urgent thing. So that's kind of what I was looking at doing.
Okay, and you talk a lot about being like, you know, the person that connects everybody. Like you're the one that like, well, if somebody asks you, hey, look, where can I find these resources? You'd be the one, like that one person to go to, right? And then you'd be able to like shoot everybody like a bunch of emails, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs take on this role, and everybody has a different perception of why they do it. Like I know that I took on this role for the podcast because I saw a hole in like the student entrepreneur market. Everybody wanted to interview a lot of elder people who had like succeeded in a different era, right? And that's okay, but that's not relevant to what people are going through now. Right. So, and it also allows me to like connect with people, and that's kind of my way of becoming a connector for other people, right? So everybody has their own perception of why they become that go-to guy. So what's your reason?
Yeah, so I fell into being that go-to guy. I wasn't talking to Cage Johnson in the org fair or whatever it was called, thinking I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to be the connector for everyone. I'm going to be the director of LEA. But when I became the director of LEA, and even in a smaller role when I was directing freshman founders, I realized very quickly that my job was not to go in and talk to every single founder and talk to every single LEA agent and say, how can I help you with my brilliance and my skills and all of the things I've learned in my management information systems classes. That was not the most useful thing that I could do. The most useful thing that I could do was say that over the last year and a half, one of the main tasks I've been doing is emailing really cool mentors, really cool entrepreneurs, really cool people to serve as judges on panels, leaders of workshops, all these different things that I got to meet at least over email and usually in person and say, wow, this person's fantastic and they know X thing. So when I had that big email list built out, and I had the other separate email list of all these people in the university, all these like contacts within the University of Texas system that have approval power and money to spend on things. It became really, really important to me to connect people to the right place. And then I think the thing that I always describe, I think I already used the phrase, but like connecting people smarter than me together, right? That's the most fulfilling thing in the world to me, because I meet so many people, especially now through Genesis, who are working on things that I can barely understand. Like we have a blockchain company that I cannot explain past the elevator pitch of the company.
Are you talking about Abacus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I love Abacus. Anand, our venture partner for them, talks about them all the time. But every time I hear them start talking about what they do past like the second sentence, I start swimming in like knowledge and I can't get out. So anyway, the point is like the idea of connecting those people is something that I know I can do because I just know, like I know what they do, I know what they have and a little bit of expertise in, and it's so much easier for me to connect them than it would be for that person to find them somewhere else and to Google and stumble across the right person. So that kind of warm lead is super important.
Do you do it more because it's more personally satisfying for you, or like
it's more helpful? It's just more impactful. I mean, it is personally satisfying to do something impactful. I'm sure that at a psychological level, that's part of why I do it. Mm-hmm. But it's also the idea of like, I know I can. It doesn't take that much work on my end. And I know that it has impact. I think one of the things I did in Freshman Founders, a friend of mine, Arjun Menta, we were trying to figure out what would be the best mentor for him, and we connected him with a professor at the university, Professor McDermott, he's founded companies, led huge tech companies, and they've been coming up with hundreds of ideas for the last 2 years, and he's been mentoring him for the last 3 years, and it's just been so spectacular to watch them grow together. And sure, I take a little bit of pride in that, but I also know that it would have been hard for Arjun to find that guy individually on his own, and he wouldn't have had that warm lead that I had when I was sitting there saying, hey, we've talked to you in the past, Professor McDermott, we have this awesome freshman, he's coming in, you know what Freshman Founders is, can you please mentor him, right? That's so helpful, and I know that that's helped Arjun, and I know that if I can do that for more than one person, then I'm just going to be really happy, but also the entrepreneurship ecosystem here is going to be way better for it.
Okay, and so I have 2 theories then.
Sure.
One is that I think that I've seen Catherine do this the most, right?
Yeah.
And it's that regardless of who she's with, who she speaks to, and I mean, I'm sure you do this as well. Most people that are very well connected do this, and it's that when they speak to someone, they're like, hey, actually, I can help you with this. I'll connect you with this person, this person, right? And I just have this theory. There's no psychology study that I read or anything like that. But I genuinely think that when you go out of your way to tell someone that, hey, look, I'll connect you to this person, and that ends up benefiting them in the long run, the person that was in between that actually connected them, like subconsciously, the person that got help from them, like feels like they owe them something in the return, right? So next time as a connector, if you need something, it's like they're more than willing to help you out.
Well, yeah, that's the whole concept or the whole concept rather of pay it forward, I think. And I don't think it's necessarily that, for example, Arjun in this scenario, I don't think it's necessarily that he owes me anything. I hope he doesn't have that feeling. Yeah. I do, however, think that a lot of entrepreneurs or a lot of people in any field who have that experience where someone connects them to the right place or shows them the right opportunity to go to, they feel this kind of gratitude for the people that helped them get there. Exactly. Because I'm sure Arjun knows on a at least a conscious level that like all I did was email Professor McDermott. That takes 2 minutes, right? And
I don't think that.
See, like all I did was email him in the right way several times, right?
But also it's your credibility, right?
Yeah,
you got
credibility or like build a relationship. But like the amount of work that it took for me to sit there and be like, oh, I can help you, I can connect you to the right person. The amount of work is low. That's not building a mobile app. The amount of work it took to do that, sure, it had a lot of like capital costs before it, if we're going to use the business term for it, but like the marginal amount of work I had to do is very low. But you feel this gratitude to the person who connected you that I think is really, really important, because you realize that person helped you get where you are, and you say, oh, I should always help the people that come to me for that same request. I should always be looking to help people. And that's something that has always inspired me about entrepreneurship, is that there are these people, and the popular conception is that they're like these lone wolves going after these ideas that are going to create the next big company, and they're all out on their island. And every single community that I've been able to visit, that I've been able to take part in, is so wonderfully, communal. They help each other so much. They're always looking to lift each other up, even though they're competing after the same resources and often the same customers. They're like trying to help everyone get the mentor that they need or talk to the right person, and that's just been inspiring to me, and it's something that I'm happy to take part of here.
Do you think that's toxic, the way that it's perceived right now, the way that the entrepreneurship scene is like perceived as, oh, you are that lone wolf that you just have to go after it alone without anybody else's help? Do you think that that's kind of toxic?
It can be if you start to believe it. I think we talked about before the podcast Elon Musk, right, taking off this lone wolf, like I'm the person running 5 companies. I think it can be toxic if you internalize that. If you internalize that culture of like, I am the only person that will make this succeed. This company lives and dies on my watch, and oh my God, if this company dies, it's my fault, and oh, no one's going to help me. I need to do this. Like all these very I-focused statements, that can be very toxic. But if you like look around, I think, and have this awareness, which is something I'm always working on doing, we're all always working on doing, of like all the people that have helped you get where you are and are currently helping you. First and foremost, if you're an entrepreneur, your team, I think it makes it that much easier to not have that idea of like, oh, I'm the lone wolf, I'm the founder, this is going to live or die by me, I'm going to live or die by this startup. Kind of that recognition is something I've certainly been working on very intentionally, because I know I'm not a part of a startup now, so it'll help immensely if I can do that in the future when that temptation seeks in.
Okay, and so then what do you like, what's your like perception on the people that build the teams versus the people that are like working within those teams? Do you think it's more difficult to be an individual worker who's like highly skilled and highly trained in that one activity, or a person that's able to like put them together and kind of create that adhesion?
Yeah, the temptation, because I don't have a super high skill in anything, is to say that the other one is hard so I can compliment myself. But I would I would say that they're just so different. They're difficult in different ways. So like if you're, for example, if you're the trope of a computer scientist who would rather never be in a meeting ever again and doesn't really want to be a connector, but you're a brilliant builder of whatever the thing may be, then it's going to be really, really difficult for you to be the community builder who's sitting there sending out 100 emails a day, trying to set up all these coffee chats and trying to find exactly the right people to add to a 5-person team. That's going to seem really difficult for you. But the other thing that you're doing is something that you've been doing for a long time, that you can really get into this psychological state of flow when you're building out a product that you love. For the other kind of person, like the classic idea, like the business major, right? The person who loves going from 15-minute meeting to 15-minute meeting to hour-long meeting and talking with all these different people with diverse perspectives, it's going to be really difficult. I know I find it really difficult to sit down and work on a problem for like 10 hours, right? Which is something that I think you need when you're a builder of anything, right? So those personalities, those kind of tropes, while they're like people don't fall perfectly into each camp, I think, people have more affinity for one or the other, right? So one is not more difficult than the other. It's really just dependent on who you are as a person and as a worker.
Yeah. So I actually want to like read you a quote from one of your daily Texcon articles, and it's entrepreneurship is for everyone. The problem is that it isn't true, not yet at least, right? And that really caught my eye because at first I was really believing that you were saying entrepreneurship is for everyone, and there's like so much war going on in that one statement. So like here you are, like go ahead and like defend it. Yeah, defend it.
Read the article. Let me tell people, read the article, because I say a lot more than that, and I think I'd find the point well in there. I did not at all mean to say, and if there was a Twitter storm on this is probably not the best way to articulate, but I didn't mean to say that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I didn't mean to say that like not everyone can do entrepreneurship. What I meant to say was that entrepreneurship on campus, at least like within our small community, does not feel accessible and is often not accessible to everyone here. I mean, there are people, I mean, like you, like your brother, like a lot of people that I meet, right, that have an idea and then they just go out and they pursue it, and that's them. They can figure it out. They do it with or without the resources that we can connect them to here on campus. But for plenty of people, they kind of just need a kickstart, or they need a key connection, a key mentor, a person that they see who's doing entrepreneurship of any form or who's involved in entrepreneurship ecosystems here on campus. And when I wrote that entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, at least not yet, what I meant was that if you're in the business school, if you're in engineering, if you're in the CS program, you're going to hear about these entrepreneurship things. You're going to know that the Blackstone Launchpad exists. You're going to know that the Genesis program exists, I hope. You're going to hear that the Long Run Entrepreneurship Agency exists. Or at least one of those three things will be true, and you'll know that you can go there and you're going to find great resources. You're going to find really cool people working on some really awesome stuff, and you're going to be able to learn from them, or at least ask them, where can I find X thing? And you'll get a much better answer. For a lot of other programs on campus, I mean, most of the ones outside of the ones that I've already mentioned, it's really difficult to find those programs. Like we haven't done as an ecosystem a good enough job of connecting the schools and breaking down the silos that exist on this campus, which any university bureaucrat or any university dean can tell you do exist. And I think that's one of the reasons that LEA and Genesis both really put such a huge stress on being cross-university, cross-college. We don't sit there and say like, oh, this person's an engineering major, that's +1 in this column. In fact, we make an active effort to sit there and go and seek out team members and seek out startups that exist in schools outside of those normal traditional schools where entrepreneurship is really popular, or at least it's something that you've heard of.
Well, do you think that, I know the answer to this, but I do want you to speak on this. And do you think that like having the idea that, a bunch of engineers working together, a bunch of computer scientists working together, do you think that forms kind of like the best teams? Because from an outside perspective, it's like, wow, these are some very brilliant minds like coming together, right? They're all super smart. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, I've seen great teams that are all computer scientists, and I've seen terrible teams that are all computer scientists, right? Like, I think there's no, in my mind, there's not this conception of like what makes a perfect team just by like major level. It's so much dependent on skill to breakdown and team dynamics. So like you can very easily see an amazing founding team where one is a neuroscience major and one goes to the School of Music here. In fact, like one of my mentors who brought me into Freshman Founders, Mitch Chide, he's an RTF major, right? Like let's assume that he or people like him would have not heard of Genesis because we don't put flyers up there, we don't market enough there, or whatever the case may be. Then those people who are awesome builders, who could really be fantastic founders or fantastic members of teams, wouldn't hear of all these great things that are happening here on campus unless we make such an active effort to do that. So no, I don't think that it's better or worse to have a team built up of certain majors. It's certainly helpful to have certain kinds of skills on a team, right? It's certainly nice to have someone who knows how to build whatever it is you're trying to build on a team. Sometimes you don't see that. But I don't sit there and say oh, it's better or worse to have a team of 5 computer scientists and a business role, right? I look much more at the individual team itself.
Okay, and so I want to bring up a point. I was actually speaking to Erin Riley from Moody College, and she's responsible for innovation over there, right?
Yeah, she's awesome.
And one thing that she pointed out was that the way that everybody else defines entrepreneurship is very different from how it should be defined, right? Yeah. And I mean, that is very, of course, that's very based on whoever's opinion. It's based on your own opinion, right? But there's also this idea that, entrepreneurship is building businesses and building this. But she explained to me after I was in the hot seat for a minute, and she explained that entrepreneurship is a mindset, right? You need to be able to train people not to think of it as, oh, I don't have any ideas, I don't know how to make money from this. It's entrepreneurship is a way of seeing a problem and doing something about it.
Right.
And so what does LEA, Genesis, and all these other organizations on campus, how are they pushing towards that aspect of entrepreneurship?
I think the whole thing is that the closer we grow as organizations, the better we can send people to the right places, I guess, because Erin Riley's doing fantastic things at the School of Communication, and she's doing a great job to sit there and say here's what entrepreneurship can look like for you, and it doesn't have to be a venture-backed company. Genesis obviously doesn't do the best job in the world of saying it has to be a venture-backed company because we're a venture capital model, but plenty of people do want that. So we exist for that subset of the student population who's sitting there wanting to create a sustainable vision or a sustainable business with a fantastic vision to change the world. And that often just happens to be with tech companies because of the impact you can have with a small number of people using the world of technology. I think the number of things that are on campus now is so wonderful and so amazing. If you talk to any alumnus from the past 20 years and compare it to what they had, for example, a good friend of mine, Sam Wei Lin, would be a great guy to have on this podcast. He started and founded the Social Entrepreneurship Learning Lab, right? Yep. And I was there helping him start that when I was the director of LEA. And what he basically said was there's no central place for you to learn about social entrepreneurship, which is a really vibrant part of entrepreneurship, a really important part of entrepreneurship, but one that LEA is only going to be able to do so much to talk about because it'll be one of the many things that we're looking to address. Or Genesis is only going to be able to do so much because it's not necessarily written into our mission, right? But if you have one person, and I'm not even this person, I try to be close to this person, who knows every single entrepreneurship resource on campus, you can cover almost every kind of entrepreneurship here on campus. It's just it's a matter of the fact that someone walking in to the School of Communication might only hear of one or two of those organizations. Someone walking in to the Butler School of Music might only hear about one or two of those things. And if we bring all of these entrepreneurship groups closer together, if we continue to work as an ecosystem, not as 18 diverse, separate organizations, then we'll be able to really serve the community in a better way, I think.
I'm guessing that was the vision behind the innovation newsletter, because that's bringing everybody together.
That was a big part of that, and I think Freddie Purchase was actually the guy who really worked hard on bringing the innovation newsletter together. We, LEA, had something like that with Ground Up Weekly, where we had a newsletter and we really wanted it sent out to everyone. We wanted all these opportunities blasted out. Innovation Weekly, we get to have Blex and Launchpad, which has a really large reach just by being a part of the university, help do that for us as well. And again, you're seeing that the focus is on everyone in the university, not just certain colleges. And that's, it's really important to me, really important to the missions of those organizations.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about how you transition into how you kind of broke your leg in a way to attend the Silicon Valley bank event.
I was so proud of myself when I thought of that headline.
I was too. I was like, this is a classic clickbait headline. It's gonna get a lot of views. But talk about that. What actually happened and how did that event go?
Yeah, so I won't ruin the article for people. I'll let you read to see what the headline actually means. But got to go on the Silicon Valley Bank trek thanks to the Herb Kelleher Center at McCombs. They were sending people there at the time, and I was selected for it. I think I was referred or nominated or something or other, but got the chance to go and be the University of Texas at Austin representative. I was really blessed to be able to do that. I use that word and I don't throw it around lightly because I think the people that I met there are some of the most spectacular people that I've ever had the chance of talking to. They were essentially 1 to 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 usually founders or community leaders from some of the most entrepreneurial colleges in the country and internationally. So there were actually 2 students from Mexico and a student from India and a student from Ireland as well. And having these talks in like small groups, really informal discussions like we're having now about how entrepreneurship looks on their university campuses, on how entrepreneurship looks in their countries and their communities or in their cities, whatever it may look like, was really amazing. And this network that we built over like 3 or 4 days is something that I know is going to be so incredibly useful and impactful for me over the next few years, because I know for me and for most people our age, we're not going to work at the same company for 40 years. That's not the goal. That's not possible a lot of the time, and that's not something that I really plan on doing. And because of that, it's going to be really helpful to just have this group of people that are working on really cool things at all times. I have confidence that that's what's going to happen, and I'll be able to sit there and just keep track of them, connect with them, bounce questions off of them. If need be, go say hi and say like, hey, I'm looking for this, or would you want to work on this with me, or can I work on the thing you're working on? That's really impactful. And then also the knowledge that that was shared on that trek was absolutely spectacular.
You sat down with the former VP of Facebook, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine because it all happened in a whirlwind. It also all happened over this past winter break, and I spent this past winter break watching college football like for what felt like 10 hours a day, and eating food and loafing on the couch. And then I went to San Francisco and just learned so darn much, like learned and talked and networked and all these wonderful buzzwords, and got to talk with like the former VP of Facebook. Got to talk with Phil Rubin, the founder of Evernote, who's working on the first AI-based venture capital firm. Like these people were coming and talking to us in a group of 20, right? So it really was just a small panel discussion, and every single time after the discussion ended, we got to go up and talk to them because there were only 20 of us. So like it was just it's a wonderful
What were
experience.
like your biggest takeaways? Like what were some things that you learned specifically?
I mean, I wrote about them in the post partially because I was having trouble like keeping track of all of the things that were said. I think
You did mention like paying it forward. I mean, like relationship building, etc. Like, I mean, even if you don't remember like your article or anything, like what's like the most prominent thing you remember?
No, I have big long takeaways. I encourage people to read the article because I wrote down like little factoids and things that I would have otherwise forgotten, like how venture capital works and stuff like that. I think one of the big takeaways was the paying it forward, which we already touched on, and then relationship building. It was really interesting because this was run by Silicon Valley Bank. The way that everyone just seemed to know each other there, right? There's seemingly 1 million people working in Silicon Valley, and there are these really impactful individuals who have built these really spectacular companies like Evernote, or these really successful venture capital firms like Redpoint, and they all either know of each other or know each other, and they all meet up some of the time to do things like this. They all get connected by things like the Silicon Valley Bank Trek, or by a conference, or by email, and they all have coffee, and all these little relationships. I cannot imagine how helpful they are in building companies and building things that last. Because if you think about how amazing it's been for me here on campus, meeting a bunch of 18, 19, and 20 and 21-year-olds here on campus that are trying to find their way in the world and trying to build cool stuff, I can't imagine what that's like when you're building those same kinds of relationships with people who have created billion-dollar companies. So the idea of this network, this neural network of these not only high net worth, but really movers and shakers in the entrepreneurship scene, all being connected somehow and all being closely connected, was really amazing for me to see and for me to witness.
Well, then how does, like, I'm actually very curious about this. How does that actually even happen? Because I see, like, I keep track of, like, the young entrepreneurship on, like, Instagram, etc. And I see, like, all of the people, like, moving to, like, Arizona and kind of centralizing that area as, you know, the young entrepreneurship scene. Then you have people in, like, Silicon Valley. Austin's trying to become, like that right now. But how do you kind of get, how do you kind of foster that kind of community?
Yeah, I think there was... I mean, I don't necessarily know how you follow. I think I'm talking about something that's like really, really long term. That's almost an ecosystem, right? There's a difference. I think I use the words interchangeably too often, but there's a difference between ecosystem and community. And I think like Silicon Valley has just the most vibrant ecosystem right now. And one of the people speaking from Silicon Valley Bank actually called it like a black hole of entrepreneurship. So if you imagine how a black hole kind of works on the physics of it, and I'm sure I'm gonna mess this up. But the idea is space-time is this big sheet, this cosmic bed sheet, and it's like a black hole is when you put a bowling ball in it, and so gravity is us sinking into that black hole, basically, sinking into that divot that it made in the space-time. What Silicon Valley is, what Silicon Valley is for entrepreneurship is just this place where you can't really avoid it, right? The gravity is so strong for this one area because there's venture capital there are all these luminaries of tech there are all these people that built gigantic companies. The tech giants themselves are there, the Zuckerbergs and the Ubers and all the different companies of the world. So the connections there are just so much more vibrant and so much, I think, in some way, just the density there is what makes it so that the community is so vibrant. So when you talk about building those communities in Arizona, you can have best practices, right? You can make sure to bring the right kinds of people and the right elements in, but the density is not going to be there for a very long time. And that's true with Austin as well. I love Austin. Austin is probably my favorite city, and I wish I could stay here for longer. But I think like Austin just doesn't have that density yet. It has an incredible amount of density, but that's just not where all of the elements are yet. So I think it is a really fascinating topic to look at. Can you build that same kind of thing either out of nothing, or can you build that out of tech hubs that have not made it to the same level of Silicon Valley?
Yeah, and I think one thing that plays into that is like it's basically become like a household name. Like even people who aren't into entrepreneurship, like they know of like Silicon Valley, right? Like
at least because of the TV
yeah,
show,
exactly.
right?
It's kind of like Bitcoin. Like everybody knew what Bitcoin was, right? Nobody knows how blockchain or crypto works.
Sure,
right?
They know what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So are you working on anything right now? Like I read something about Desk.
Yeah, so I'm not working on Desk right now, but I was working on it. I learned a lot of things by working on Desk. That was kind of the most successful failed startup that I've worked on, is like what I like to say. But anyway, Desk was a really cool platform. We were building a mobile app that was easiest way to describe it is like Notability for engineering students. So if you think about all the ways that you can take notes on mobile devices or on your computer, they're all very much based on the written word. They're based on capturing ideas and writing them down. And the concept we were working on was the idea that engineers are often solving problems with their pen and paper and calculator and all these different things. And we were trying to put that onto the iPad and really make the convenient alternative to Notability there. And a lot of the things we worked on were really technically challenging and were a lot of fun. That was my first real experience with like the user-focused and the user-centric design methodology of only working on the things that people actually need and actually want, because that might not be the most complex calculation tool that a bunch of computer scientists can make. It might be that the back button works a certain way. And so that was really fun. That was a lot of learning, but I'm not working on that now. It was a learning experience for me.
Okay, and what did you learn the most from it?
I mean, user-centric design was actually the thing that I tend to write about most when I talk about Desk, and also working in an environment with people that are not like me. I think one of the mistakes that I've made in previous entrepreneurial ventures is I'll work with co-founders, or I'll work with people who are very much like me in the skills that they have. So I worked with another business owner's friend on a project, and we had very similar skills, so they weren't very complementary. When I was working on Desk, I was working with, I think it was four kids in the computer science school. One was an electrical engineer, and then it was me. And I had very few technical skills. So it was us being the co-founders was a very different experience, because there was such a different breakdown of work and a breakdown of perspectives that really helped us do a lot, like have more robust discussions about how we wanted to move the company forward, A, but B, just do a lot more things and move a lot faster, because we all could learn the skills that we needed to have much more quickly based on what we already knew how to do. And then the other big takeaway, the thing that I personally learned about, was user-centric design, basically. I think when I came in and was working on the team, a lot of the time we would talk about what we wanted to do, like what would be the next cool feature to add. And something that I started reading about and trying very hard to implement in the discussions we were having in the sprint planning was, okay, have we asked our users what they want? Have we looked into the user tests that we've done, and has it been revealed to us that this is the thing that they are most frustrated by or are most in need of? And if that's true, how do we work around that? Because often that didn't present the most interesting technical challenges to solve, right? But it did really point us to like the most important ones to solve if we wanted our app to solve problems for people.
That's the lean startup methodology.
It is very much the lean startup methodology. I'm probably sounding like a broken record. So I'm sure many podcasts talk about that. But learning that in an experience is so different from reading it in a book. I read the book in like freshman year, right?
Yeah, no, 3-day startup actually, like you go through the implementation.
Yeah,
like
and I did 3-day startup in freshman
yeah,
year, right?
exactly.
Like,
and I actually worked on this project, and I mean, it's still in the works right now, but it's called like Helping Snack. And basically, the concept was that every time, like, it was very simple. It's like Tom's model, where every time someone buys a box of snacks, we go and deliver like things that like homeless people, that like things that they would need over time, right? Like blankets, socks, etc. And it, like, I went door to door and sold this, and I sold like $5,000 worth of it, right? But then like I tried to prove out the model to like scale it, and it was like, when I went to 3-day startup, they were like, no, actually you need to just go outside of Starbucks and like figure out your target market. Our target market was and like, I hope I can say this on camera, but it's like a rich white woman that's like 38 years old. And so we have to go outside Starbucks, outside SoulCycle, and like ask all these people, like, and we figured out that they're like, they wouldn't actually be interested in this stuff because they already get their stuff. They already get their healthy snacks from somewhere else. So I think that methodology is very, very important in like actually realizing whether or not your product is viable before you start building it out.
Right. Whether or not it's viable, or then once you've kind of found a viable product, what are the features that they want, right? Like that's endemic not only to entrepreneurship, but like product management. How do you build great products? All these things are very related, and it's fascinating how many times it had to be told to me before I actually went out and did it and realized how important it was. Like, I'm almost mad how the light bulb went off so late, essentially, for me to like realize, oh, when you talk to your users and they say this sucks, then you ask them why it sucks, and then they tell you, and then that's what you're supposed to be working on.
Well, I mean, you live and you learn. That's like literally the way that you figure out what to do in your next startup. So you've actually been in the startup community for a long time now.
Wow, now,
right? But what's like some like patterns that you see that student entrepreneurs, some misconceptions that they have about starting a business, building a startup? Like when a kid comes up to you and it's just like, Daniel, I want to start this company. Like what is a huge misconception they have?
A huge misconception that I often correct, and maybe that's just because I'm a business student, so I see this more because I find all these other freshman business students, is that I have a great idea and I need a coder to go build it. And that is, I'm sure you've heard that one a billion times.
I'm a computer science
student. I know, so you probably hear the business students saying it. I wrote about that in the Daily Texan article that you mentioned. I mean, it bothers the hell out of me, again, because I was like that in freshman year. I was like, wow, this is a great idea. I made some mock-ups. Now I just need someone to go build it, someone who knows how the code works, right? Like, and it bothers me immensely because I think you lose the respect of potential co-founders when you say that, when you basically say like, oh, I have an idea and I've kind of validated it and I need someone else to do all of the work to build it. And so, I mean, like, there are plenty of times where people who are business leaders, who are business-focused founders, need people who with more technical skills to be their co-founders so that they can actually build it out. That's fine. I think the misconception that a lot of people have is the difference between lean startup or rather the importance of lean startup and bootstrapping and all these things that you can do well before you need a computer scientist or to pay $8,000 to a coder somewhere else who you can outsource it to. The things that you can do to validate your idea and make sure that it's the right one before like taking that plunge, whether it's with a co-founder or with paying people to do it, I think is something that I am constantly trying to correct for. It's something that I am constantly trying to tell people about, and I think it's something that's never going to completely go away as long as there exists a business school and a computer science school.
So what should they do instead then, instead of like looking for that computer science student to code everything for them?
So I think one of the best examples I've ever heard of this, Harlan Beverly, I'm pretty sure, is who shared this with me. And I'm pretty sure this is an Austin company as well, but I can't remember the name of it. There were these two founders who had this idea. They were going to do a meal planning service where they helped people, helped particularly poor mothers in the Austin area plan out meals for their families by finding them discounts at a bunch of different grocery stores, which is a really cool idea. It's like saving money for the people who most need it by using this really technological platform that'll find all these coupons and make cool meals for them, and convenience and all these great other things. I'm not doing a great job of describing the product, but point is, instead of sitting there and building out a wonderful algorithmic way of finding all of the discounts available online and creating a meal that will taste good and be organic and all of these other things, what they did is they went out and found a bunch of these mothers, a bunch of these people that they thought would be their target audience, and said, okay, I've got this service for you. Will you use it? And they said yes. And I said, okay, cool. We're gonna send a newsletter. We're gonna create a website that'll send you the meal plan along with the discounts right away. And they said, okay, great. And then they went and individually found discounts, like manually went to HEB, manually went to all these other grocery stores, found the discounts, created the meals, like figured out what recipes were going to go together, and then sent them and said, okay, our service did this. And from that, they were able to learn exactly what kinds of things and exactly what kind of features they needed to work on and they needed to actually build for this target audience. And I'm sure they also learned what their target audience actually looked like. So at no point did they really code anything besides a landing page. They basically were just writing down the places that, like the lowest cost items at grocery stores that they could build into good meals for these families without ever writing code, without ever like spending a huge amount of resources, most importantly time, on building something that they might not have even needed to build. So like, again, that's straight out of the Lean Startups book, I'm sure, but it's so wonderfully important to have that kind of perspective of like, before I even code anything, let me see if I can find a quick way of learning, a quick way of getting that data on whether I'm A, solving the right problem, and B, building the right solution.
I almost think that it's actually like not necessary for you to build software until you're actually ready to like scale it up, right?
Yeah.
Like all of the, like you see Uber Eats, you see all of Favor, all of these companies have that huge algorithm that they work on in the background, right? But they used to do these things like either manually, I'm not sure what Favor's story is or Uber Eats story is, but I'm sure they did some sort of manual work beforehand before they tried to like scale upwards, right? Like Uber Eats obviously didn't need to do manual work because they had Uber, but most companies do that and prove out that model. I think most people just directly think that they need to have some sort of software up and running, and that'll get a lot of users.
Right. I mean, there was a company at my 3-day startup that was called Food Jump. I love talking about Food Jump. I don't think they ever actually made it. But my friend Jacob Reed was working on this, and the idea was like you would press a button and it would deliver food to you from a random list of curated options. So like it's like the I'm feeling lucky button on Google for food. And I thought that was a hilarious idea. It always makes me giggle when I think of it. But the fun part was that they, at 3-day startup, they built a landing page. You would press a button and it would say, okay, your food's on the way, right? That wasn't software at all. They weren't matching with demand. They weren't using Uber Eats or Favor. They were sitting there saying, okay, we got a landing page. When someone presses that button, we better go out and find some food for them. And that was like a great way to validate whether people were actually going to use that, is to actually get them to use that, right? Those kinds of things, again, like there are stories of it everywhere. You can read the Lean Startup and see that that's something that's worked. But when you actually do it is when you realize how important it is.
Okay, so we've like discussed a lot about entrepreneurship and startups. What are you passionate about outside of that?
Ooh, a lot of things. I mean, I can talk about the little things like board games. I love having board game nights with my friends. I play soccer all the time. I play sports and stuff. I mean, I think one of the funny things that surprises people a lot is I'm actually really passionate about history and about political thought. I'm a Jefferson Scholars certificate. I'm a proud, like, I'll wear that sticker and wear that shirt all the time. I always think it's fascinating to talk about like the leaders of the past and governmental structures and all these things that really impact people's lives across history and how they change. So I'm the kind of guy who does read a lot of political articles, but I'm also the kind of person who loves to talk about Supreme Court precedent or like the Federalist Papers and all these really nerdy things that I'm very passionate, that I'm sure some of my friends and my girlfriend are very tired of hearing about. And it feels a lot of the time when I talk about it to be very separate from entrepreneurship, but I've been starting in the last year to kind of think about how similar they can be.
I think that happens with a lot of things because over time you start like creating these connections and you're just like, oh, holy crap, I never saw this before, right? What do you find like, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was actually going to say a connection I was finding. So for example, in history, there's this idea of the great man theory of history. I literally had a coffee chat yesterday where I was talking about this because it's a thought that's been in my mind that I've been trying to get out. I should probably write it down. But this idea that there's this great man theory of history, right? So the great man theory of history is that across all of these really important moments in history, the great men, so to say, like the people you remember the name of, the Caesars, the Napoleons, the George Washingtons, they arise at these times of great turmoil or great uncertainty and have more impact than any other factor on what happens during that historical time, and the impact they have is just so wonderfully outsized. So essentially, many contemporary historians have kind of pushed back against that and said all these other really important environmental conditions are much more important than the people that are there. And the connection that I've been drawing to entrepreneurship is this idea that we really still have this great man theory of entrepreneurship. We sit there and when we think of Apple, you think of Steve Jobs, right? When people in general think of Apple, they actually like, or think of like how Apple works or how it made the products that it did. They say, oh, Steve Jobs made it. And it's like, or maybe they say Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak made it, right? That's not necessarily true. It required a whole amazing organization. It required just the right amounts of talent, just the right kinds of mentors, just the right kinds of technologies to be fed into this wonderful revolution that brought us the Mac and then the iPhone and then and everything in between. So I think it's really interesting for us when we think about and when we talk about entrepreneurs and when we talk about companies and when we talk about tech in general, to kind of think about how we're talking about it in the same way that we used to talk about history, which is the great man theory of history. And I don't know whether we're moving away from that necessarily.
I think we're getting more into it, actually.
I think, yeah.
Because there's this idea that everyone, like every big company has like this figurehead, right? And it's like, you look at Elon Musk and it's like, wow, how's he running all 5 companies? But I actually read somewhere that, and I might be wrong on which company it exactly is, but he either focuses on SpaceX more or Tesla more. But in one of them, there's actually, I think it's the CTO or something.
SpaceX. It's like the person who actually runs SpaceX.
Yeah, she actually runs the entire operation. It's like she does not get any credit, and I'm sure she does in like the entrepreneur, like the super
or
granular,
in her company, right?
Yeah, or even in her company, or in like the area where everybody actually knows what's going on.
Right.
But outside of it, just like Silicon Valley, everybody knows the name, everybody knows Elon Musk, and they think that he's doing all these things themselves.
Right, and I think that's really dangerous for one. I mean, like there's especially in America that's really easy to do because we sit there and we say like the best of us are these entrepreneurs, these industrialists, right? I think it's really dangerous though because it discourages people it encourages people to think that they have to be that kind of person to be involved in entrepreneurship or to make a difference in the world. When again, the most important people are sometimes the people that don't get the credit, right? Like the most important people are people we may know the names of later, but are footnotes, right? And Elon Musk is like not the only reason that Tesla is succeeding, and not the only reason that SpaceX is succeeding.
I just think about, to be honest, I just think about those engineers that are like working tirelessly, right. And like I'm a Elon Musk fanatic, and I've read about his like extremely, like he will come into the office and he'll be like, today I need to fire someone. Yeah. And I remember his advisor, like I think it was in his book, and one of his advisors was like, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't need to fire someone. He's like, nope, I need to fire someone. And I was like, do you know how smart these people are, how much they work to get to where they are? And like, they're literally building this man's vision, giving up half their life, and they could be fired in like 5 seconds because of that. Yeah. So,
I mean, and he does have an outsized impact, and he's the one who brings in those brilliant people. Exactly. They're attracted to his vision. Like, I don't mean to say that he's somehow not impactful. Mm-hmm. It's just the idea, like, we seem to attribute every good thing to these leaders as well.
Exactly.
And I think it's also like the other part of that that's really fascinating is for these companies, you often associate the company with that founder's personality.
Exactly.
And I find that really fascinating. So Facebook's culture, for example, which has been under such scrutiny recently, and I worked at Facebook, so it's really fascinating for me, is really shaped and designed and culturally thought to be around Mark Zuckerberg, around this like somewhat soft-spoken developer who's going to build great things that change the world. And Uber's personality used to be, or still kind of is, very much around its founder, Travis Kalanick's very brash, aggressive, we're going to build something huge really quickly. Yeah. Like the way you think of them.
That's that, because until you just mentioned that, I just realized that I did have this perspective of Uber being like this super aggressive monster that
we're going
to
fight the man, right? That's what Travis did, right? Like Travis yelled at people, right? Like he yelled at government regulators. He built like secret programs that he shouldn't have done. It was all about like move fast and intentionally break things, right?
Well, I mean, then what about Steve Jobs? Because I mean, the way I view Apple, or the way most people, it's like this nice, clean, like
right. Well, I mean, the difference there, and like obviously this is such it's a theory in its infancy here that I'm applying. But I think for Steve Jobs, like he had such a passion for design, right? So such that the consumer products that he built were so perfectly designed and so like nice and sleek, right? That it's easy for you to associate that with Apple, and a lot of really intentional work was put into making the brand and the product be that closely associated, and that's why they make such wonderful profit margins, right?
On this episode of Psychology Today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences.
Of course.
Do you have anything that you want to promote or anything like that?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I think the big thing that I want to promote here is the Genesis program. So if I haven't already talked about it, the Genesis program is a student alumni partnership where we are funding student entrepreneurs here on the University of Texas campus, and we've raised over $1.8 million to achieve that mission. In fact, we are now adding people to the team, so if you're interested in applying for that and you're a student here on this campus, please go to genesisprogram.org/join. And if you're a student who might have an idea or who might have a startup that they're already working on, we'd also love to see you apply because we love giving out money to student entrepreneurs. That money is entirely equity free. And more importantly, we love mentoring you and helping you grow into the companies that you're destined to become. So please go to genesisprogram.org if you want to learn more. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, always.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.